Hello and welcome back. Happy Wednesday on a Thursday, everyone. Today we are going to be doing a rundown of Tinto Talks number 51, which is talking about the not-so-secret, definitely secret, super secret game which we won't discuss. We won't even use the codename for it. This is the game which we will be discussing. So in this game, we are going to be discussing subjects and subjects interactions, which is going to be quite nice. So let's jump into it and hope that Johan has returned. Johan has returned. Last week, he was being held captive against his will. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, but we will achieve and receive our Happy Wednesday from Johan. Welcome to the 51st Tinto Talks, the Happy Wednesday, capitalized as it should be, as it is a holiday, where we give you information on our entirely secret game with the codename we won't say because it's just that secret. Also, speaking of codes and speaking in codes, we do see that codename is also capitalized, which is code for the thing we're not supposed to talk about, which we know about, which is a code, which we're definitely not lacing into this development diary for you to read into while we are talking in code. I hope that makes sense, but even more than that, I hope it doesn't make sense. Today we will talk about subjects and how they function in our game. Subjects and their overlord. In Project Teaser, as it starts at the end of the medieval era, and reaches the post-Napoleonic world, we have to have a system that works for feudal states and also for grand empires spanning the world. This is simulated by our subject system, so very excited because it does have to be dynamic enough to handle both of these relationships, although kind of the end of feudalism, right? A subject is any country that is subordinate to an overlord. Makes sense? It typically has limitations on its diplomacy in return for protection in a war. Subjects may also suffer subject taxation and have certain privileges and of their great power score exacted by their overlord. Of course, this makes sense. Additionally, a subject may not become a great power. How could they? They are subject to a great power. The exact rules are dependent on the subject type. Subjects have loyalty towards their overlord and liberty desire, both of which indicate their current stance on their subordination. Interesting to have both loyalty and liberty desire. I suppose you could be disloyal, but really valuing the protection of your overlord, and you could also simultaneously want to be free, but also quite love your overlord. Any subject may in turn be the overlord of the other countries, allowing long chains of subject-overlord relationships. An overlord is a country that has any number of subjects in as its subordinates. In return for protecting each of these subjects in wars, it typically receives a subject taxation and exacts a certain percentage of the subject's great power score. So this is going to be a little bit interesting. I wonder to what extent you can push up your great power score with having subjects, because this has been something that we haven't seen as much in previous games, and maybe having an enormous vassal swarm will allow you to really push it up. Actually, I think we've seen it, but there's mechanics that make it in EU4, if I recall correctly, that make it so that if you have a ton of subjects and your subject's overall power level is really high relative to yours, they will become upset and will want to gain liberty. The exact rules are dependent on each subject's subject type. This makes sense. Something that is more informal and less extractive is probably more tolerable for a subject. Any overlord may in turn be the subject of other countries, allowing long chains of subject-overlord relationship. Who can make the longest conga line? This is content. Subject loyalty. Every subject has a subject loyalty towards their overlord, ranging from 0 to 100, and when a subject has less than 50 subject loyalty towards its overlord, it becomes a disloyal subject. Interesting that you hit that mark at 50. When in such a state, it will no longer join the wars of its overlord and cannot be annexed. This makes some sense. There's also the concept of liberty desire, and I'm curious to see the distinction between the two, which represents the subject's current drive from independence from its overlord, and it all affects loyalty. Liberty desire affects loyalty. I guess that certainly makes sense. And I'm curious, what are the situations where your liberty desire is high and your loyalty is low, or vice versa? It ranges from minus 100 to plus 100, but as a monthly decay towards 0. The value is also used as currency in some subject interactions. Interesting. We can use liberty desire as a currency. So we do stuff to lower their liberty desire, and then we extract from them, raising it. We see loyalty to France is a 61.87% right now, because of power relative to overlord, subject opinion of overlord, and a base value for every country. Currently, as it is at least 50, the subject is loyal, and we will see this relative power being a factor here. But this is power relative to overlord. This is the way this is worded suggests that this is on a per subject relationship. So if you have one really big subject, they'll probably be more disloyal than if that subject were cut in half in two different subjects, I suppose. We will see diplomatic capacity. This is some stuff we've also seen in EU4, so it looks like to some extent they may be porting over a lot of their same systems. Diplomatic capacity, as we mentioned in earlier Tinto talks, yes we did, the cost of having a subject is not a fixed number as in previous games. Love that this is the case. Before, you used to be gated by the number of relationships you had, and so it was annoying. If you had a really small subject, you would look to annex them as quickly as possible because they were occupying a slot of yours. Now, instead of a fixed number of slots, you have a capacity in general, and subjects will occupy a percentage of that capacity or a proportion of that capacity that scales with their size. We have made, but depends on many factors, including the type of subject. So we see the cost of vassalization of Flanders here is going to be lower, increased because of the subject type, increased because of the relative income. Interesting. So as you have a bigger and bigger income, you can subjugate more people. This certainly makes sense from an empire building perspective. Exciting to see that as a factor in game. Relative size of navies, another factor that excuse me, is important, and really this makes me think of Victoria 3, where your ability to project power was largely dependent on your navy, and so something like this would definitely play nicely in Victoria 3, where the relative size of navies is a factor. Country rank of subject we see is not a factor, and relative size of armies we see that, hey, it looks like Flanders is maybe a little large relative to their overlord, or very small relative to their overlord, and so this is decreasing the cost of this, right? So we see pluses in the green, and maybe we're a little bit confused as to which one is which, but we also see France uses over its cap of 5.4 diplomatic capacity, and it is paying the most for Brittany, followed by Flanders, is giving guarantee to Scotland, and then down here it is paying 0.1, something that is cut off for Valentinois. Certainly we have to mispronounce something in French this episode, and we will have a variable rate, which makes it so that you don't have to do weird gamey stuff like intentionally annex or not annex someone based on their size in a way that kind of feels gimmicky. With everything being proportionate, it will generally just feel nicer. We also see, due to being over the limit, we are going to have some penalties here, including decreased loyalty of subjects. That seems like quite a bit amount. Antagonism impact, diplomatic reputation. If diplomatic reputation as a numerical value is as powerful as it is in EU4, this is actually a really steep negative. And so they probably have to, as France here, give up something. But also, interestingly enough, because this scales dynamically, if you lock someone in as a subject and then you vassal feed them to make them huge, this will push you over capacity, and so this will prevent some strangeness in terms of vassal feeding strategies, which I do think is also a nice little factor here. That is definitely a play pattern in EU4. Of course, we have nested tooltips, our favorite, to find out detailed information. Here we have to create new subjects. If you have locations in more than 2 different provinces, you'll always have the possibility to create a subject of one of your provinces. This is really nice that this is going to be available on release. This is like Create March or something. This was gated behind DLC in EU4. You can also select from the valid subject types that your country can have in that province. After you have selected the type of country you want, you may, if the type of subject allows it, pick a character to be the ruler of the new subject. Oh baby, we are putting philosophers and stuff on the throne. Talk about philosopher kings. Now all we need to do is convince them to make the game's end date much later so that we can make Nietzsche king, or much earlier so that we can make Hannibal king, but I guess we'll have to settle for Leonardo da Vinci. Okay. There are also many ways to convince your subject to change from one subject type to another subject type where it might also be valid. We did see that you could use liberty desire as a resource to try and push certain things. So maybe you do a bunch of stuff to decrease their liberty desire a whole bunch, and then use that negative liberty desire or desire to be, loyal to you, except loyalty is a different mechanic, but you translate that into changing the subject type. And in this way, you can play this sort of diplomatic small ball where you slowly massage a loyal subject towards a more and more increasingly favorable diplomatic relation with you. The most typical type of subject, a vassal, oversees its territory on behalf of its overlord, pays vassal fees, and joins up the military campaigns of the overlord. Almost all countries can make vassal subjects. Almost all. This is the curiosity here, the exception to the rule. I wonder who that is kind of the exception. And we see what is going to be present in the vassal relationship. It cannot cancel this relation on their own. They are a subject. They can be annexed at a progress of 5 per month, so this is probably going to be our standard relationship and is going to be the really frequent one and how most subjects are represented. I think this is the case in EU4 where it is called vassal as well. It can be only annexed after 10 years, so you could subjugate someone 10 years later, you annex them. Flanders can only be annexed if they've got at least plus 150 relations. Definitely makes sense. We have building rules. France can build resource gathering operations in Flanders locations. France can build roads in Flanders locations, and it can build buildings in Flanders locations. I wonder who gets the money. I wonder if Flanders is getting ownership of the building, or if ownership of the building is separated off from the building. I very much doubt that is the case. That is the case in Victoria 3, which is interesting and makes foreign investment a bit of a dynamic strategy, but I'm kind of suspect that will not be the case, but it might be probably the most reasonable thing for you to build will be roads, allowing them to access the market better. But maybe you just needed more of a particular resource. It's available in the locations of your subjects and it's worth building. Who knows? We have diplomatic rules. Flanders is limited by France regarding diplomacy. France needs a bit of diplomatic capacity to maintain this relation, and also they give food access. Sorry, throat's a little bit scratchy here. But they will defoin. That sounds like a French word, except it's not. They will join both offensive and defensive wars as a result of this relationship, and we will see benefits for overlord monthly prestige. I wonder if this prestige scales with their size? I hope it does. If the prestige does not scale with the size, then it's going to incentivize you to make a ton of really, really small vassals, but there also might be a floor on the vassalization cost, making this not a good strategy. But we also spread 20% of embraced institutions to Paris. That is a curious one, which maybe creates an interesting play pattern where you could, if you get an institution in a particular location, you could just release that as a subject just to make it so that you will get more spread in your country. This seems like a bit of a strange thing. This does seem to kind of open up like exploitative play patterns, which I'm not necessarily thrilled with. And then we have the tax. Flanders pays 5.9 a month. And we also see benefit for subject, efficiency for our cabinet, and also spreads the other direction, embraced institution, to Bruges. And so we probably need to improve and merge some lines here to make the tooltip less unwieldy. Yeah, that's probably the case. This is a pretty long, lengthy one. We will see some other subject relations here. A fiefdom is a junior title that is the property of its overlord's ruler. This can only be created and maintained by a monarchy, though. There are some drawbacks to it, as it cannot be created by diplomatic offers and does not grant any prestige. Interesting. Another thing is also control. As a mechanic makes it so that if you have a far-flung empire, your ability to exercise control economically, militarily, and in every sort of way is decreased as it radiates farther and farther from your seat of power. Of course, this is scaled by various things that you have in which to increase control, like your roads, the amount of naval presence you have, allowing you to propagate information and influence better. But with the mechanic of control, I really hope it would be very exciting if it makes sense to sometimes, if you have kind of a far-flung area, to release this area as a subject because you can't maintain proper control over it yourself, I think that this would definitely be a strong, if the mechanics encourage you to do this, this would be a strong and kind of immersive pattern that I think is kind of fundamental, at least in the early stages of the game, before like the empire building and this type of stuff, when managing a far-flung empire is different. So this is a bit exciting. Fiefdom kind of sounds like maybe a little bit of that. We also see March. It's a subject country focused on defending our domain, acting as a barrier between their overlord and external threats. They pay half the gold and cannot be annexed, but March gets a discipline boost and gets better lasting forts that are also cheaper. I suspect Marches will be really good, considerably better than they are in EU4, if although we haven't played EU4 in a hot minute, so we probably shouldn't compare in that way to EU4, but they will be considerably better if it is easy to cycle between relationships. We already read that you can change your overlord status or type of overlord. Putting marches on the border might be good. Also, if there's modifiers that are present from having a shared border that are negative and you want to avoid those, creating marches is maybe going to be a reasonable play pattern. Really exciting if creating a lot of subjects is a strong play pattern, especially in the early game. That is going to be really exciting. We see colonial nation. A colonial nation is a subject centered around the administration of overseas colonies on behalf of its overlord. There are two ways to create a colonial nation. First of all, you can make one from a conquered overseas territory, but secondly, and most commonly, you have the option to create one directly from one of your colonial charter. When one of your colonial charters finishes, colonial nation gives up to 33% of its trade capacity, so this is beyond just income, and trade advantage to the overlord, while also giving up 10% of the manpower and sailors, and pays 20% of their tax to the overlord, really giving their overlord quite a lot of power here. The colonial game and trade was a fundamental play pattern that really, really excited me about EU4. Haven't played it in a hot minute, but this just, this gets me excited here. Next up, we have Conquistadors as a subject type, which is not what I was expecting to see on this list. Conquistadors are the leader of a private army who has signed contracts with their rulers to explore and conquer certain territories in exchange for the title of governor and a share of the new lands and spoils. This is exciting. This is very exciting. We can conquer the New World, not just colonize, but also conquer. This is a unique type of subject only available to Catholic countries, boo, with the capital in Iberia, boo boo. And this advance is available from the Age of Discovery. We want it all. We want to have it all. But okay, maybe this makes sense. And this is incentivizing, the Portuguese and Spaniards to... Well, not just the Portuguese and Spaniards, right? The Castilians and the Aragonese. A conquistador... It also has to be Catholic, so you can't do Muslim and then do this. Unless there's a way to swap religions. So no Al-Andalus getting conquistadors. A conquistador can be commissioned by selecting an area in America and then a charter to lead them. It will also require about 2,000 manpower and some gold to start. It will start with preparing in a nearby port. So this is so fascinating because this will be... I think this is going to be a tag that doesn't have, right? This is so interesting. This is going to be a tag that doesn't have a specific location, but instead goes out and conquers the New World on your behalf. And this is one of the locationless tags that we have seen. But this is it operating as a subject relationship is so cool. Man, I just really want to experience what this is like. But let's kind of read on here. Preparing to start a conquistador to Piton in Lisbon is going to take us horses, cloth, leather, weaponry, liquors, the usual, just a few months, and then it's off for the conquest of paradise. Afterwards, the conquistador has gathered enough resources for their expedition, and they will sail, and you will hear from them the next type in a few months, informing you that they have started their activities. And here we see I just started saying conquistador, right? The conquista of Sotuta. Our conquistador arrived in Sotuta, ready to spread our influence. Let's see what we can find. Let's see what he can find. Is this what he was referring to? Is this, let's see what we can find, let's see what he can find? Is this the coded message that we received from Johann at the start, having to do with the code name he, we, them, who, this Conquistador? This spawns an army-based country in a location in the area, starting with about 2 regiments of conquistadors. They start at war with the owner of the location where they spawn, and will automatically conquer any location they gain control over. Very cool. They also have the capacity to raise levies from local people. Even if it's not an accepted culture, if they manage to get peace or get enough locations, they will convert into a colonial nation of yours. Wow, talk about conquering the new world. This, of course, is a very, very cool subject relationship. Only available to, the Iberians who are Catholic, but this is so cool. Some other unique subject types that we will go into detail when we talk about countries that can use them in the Tinto flavor, including appendages, my favorite, state banks, Hanseatic members, and more, with the 2 periods. More hidden messages. Playing as an overlord, several types of subjects allow the overlord to annex a subject. Annexation is when an overlord completely takes over one of its subjects. The overlord will gain all of the subject's own locations, and any character not fleeing to other country. Yikes. A disloyal subject cannot be annexed, though, and the cost of annexation depends on the amount of cities and towns that subject has, with rural locations having less of an impact. Okay, that certainly makes sense. Annexation progress we do see is going to be 2 a month due to a different subject type. Remember, with vassalization, we saw it be 5 a month, so a fiefdom will be annexed slower, and it does cost 666.66 because of modifiers and reasons. We see rural settlement 12 giving around 600. This town isn't too much more expensive than the rural settlements, though, right? Less than 30 years should be worth it, of course. There are also plenty different subject interactions, like giving locations or provinces to your subjects, take land, manpower, gold from them, and much more. So, if the cost is based on having cities, perhaps it is worthwhile or makes sense to take land from them before you annex them. But of course, they probably really dislike it if you take cities from them rather than rural area. But we will see a full 22 subject interactions. Wow. Cancel vacillation status, seed province, seed location, seed province, change court language, change fiefdom status, demand additional tribute, divert trade, embargo, rival, enable scuddage, install new ruler, pay off debt, place relative on throne, our personal favorite. We like some nepotism. Press sailors, request officers, return land, seize territory, send officers, siphon income, start annexation, start war and colony, support loyalists. That is quite the list, and this might not even be comprehensive. There might be more that you gain or unlock with advances. Who knows? And of course, there are other unique ones. Yeah, exactly. Playing as a subject. If you play as a subject, a country that is a subject, you have a few tools at your disposal. First of all, there are 2 different cabinet actions you can make use of. Frustrate annexation. This uses administrative capacity. The ruler of the cabinet, a member assigned to slow down annexation. Oh man, if you're a subject and you're getting annexed, you're feeling in a bad way. By hindering their delegates with an archaic constitutional legislature and obstructing them at every turn, ayo, this sounds familiar to us, we can also increase the amount of time it will take for our overlord to annex us. Makes sense. And so disloyalty. You can use this action. This action uses the diplomatic ability of the ruler and the cabinet member assigned to the task to reduce the loyalty to your overlord. By spreading cruel rumors about your overlord and espousing the benefits of ruling ourselves, we can decrease our own subject loyalty, potentially becoming a disloyal subject, which of course cannot be annexed. Effective skill, we do see some of the interaction here of sowing disloyalty. We see that it will benefit from both our ruler and our also cabinet member who's engaged in it. Crown type, vassal type, and royal marriage rights are all contributing to this as well, which is reducing loyalty by 14. Maybe I need a better cabinet member. That's probably true. Isn't this always true, though? And if you want to become independent, there are 2 ways to do it. First of all, there's the classic option of declaring war on your overlord, but that is often not entirely a good idea, especially if you have a tax base of about 1% of your overlord. That makes sense. However, the other option in Project Teaser is to start an independence movement. Interesting. This is starting to sound like a big three here. This is somewhat similar to a coalition in that it is an international organization with a targeted country. You can invite other countries to join it, including other subjects of the same overlord, and when you've gathered enough strength in your movement, often securing the backing of another powerful country, you can start the war and have a chance at liberty. This, of course, will make a lot of sense to do, and I remember back in the day, this is how you would often approach it in EU4, restarting until you could get like France as your ally, so that you could, break free of Burgundy as your kind of play pattern. Of course, that was really long time ago when we played a lot of EU4, but that is the back of the list. I hope you guys got the hidden coded message that we put into this dev diary that was very secret, very top, and also it was a teaser, a project teaser. But we did talk about subjects. Very excited to see about the Conquistador. That's an absolutely fascinating one. But I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm thing. And other than that, have a happy Wednesday on a Thursday.